Goblin Tales of Lancashire by James Bowker. The Headless Woman. It was near upon 12 when Gabriel Fisher bade good night to the assembled roisterers, who were singing and shouting in the kitchen of the White Bull at Longridge, and turning his back to the cosy hearth upon which a huge log was burning, emerged into the moonlit road. With his dog Trotty close at his heels, he struck out manfully towards Tootle Height and Thornley, for he had a long and lonely walk before him. It was a clear and frosty night, but occasionally a light cloud sailed across the heavens and obscured the moon. Rapidly passing between the 2 rows of cottages which constituted the little straggling village, his footsteps ringing upon the frozen ground, Gabriel made for the fells, and as he hurried along, he hummed to himself a line of the last song he had heard, and now and again burst into a fit of laughter as he remembered a humorous story told by Old Shuffler. When he reached the highest point of the road, whence he could see the beautiful Chipping Valley, a soft breeze was whispering among the fir trees with that faint rustle suggestive of the gentle fall of waves upon a beach. Here and there a little white farmhouse or labourer's cottage was gleaming in the moonlight, but the inmates had been asleep for hours. There was an air of loneliness and mystery over everything, and though Gabriel would have scorned to admit that he was afraid of anything, living or dead, before he had passed out of the shadow of the weird-looking melodious branches, he found himself wishing for other company than that of his dog. He suddenly remembered, too, with no access of pleasurable feelings, that on the previous day he had seen a solitary magpie, and all sorts of stories of banister dolls and ginny green teas with which his youthful soul had been carefully harrowed came across his mind. He tried to laugh at these recollections, but the attempt was by no means a successful one, and he gave expression to a hearty wish that Kemple End were not quite so far off. Just then a sharp, shrill cry fell upon his ear, and then another, and another. "The Gabriel Ratchets," he shouted. "What's about to happen?" The cries were not repeated, however, and he went on, but when he reached the peak of the fell and gazed before him into the deep shade of a plantation, he could not repress a slight shudder, for he fancied that he saw something moving at a distance. He paused for a moment or two to assure himself, and then went on again slowly, his heart throbbing violently as he lessened the space between the moving object and himself. The dog, as though equally influenced by similar feelings, crept behind him in a suspicious and terrified manner. "It's no but a woman," said he, somewhat reassured. "It's a woman, surely. Maybe somebody's badly and who's going for help. Come on, Trotty, mon." So saying, he quickened his pace, the dog hanging behind, until he approached almost close to the figure, when, with a wild howl, away Trotty fled down the hillside. As Gabriel drew still closer, he saw that the object wore a long light cloak and hood, and a large coal-scuttle bonnet, and surprised to find that the sound of his footsteps did not cause her to turn to see who was following, he called out, "It's a bonny night, missus, but you're out rather late, aren't you?" "It is very fine," answered the woman, in a voice which Gabriel thought was the sweetest he had ever heard, but without turning towards him as she spoke. "Summat's wrong at your folks, happen?" he asked, anxious to prolong the talk. There was no reply to this, though, and Gabriel knew not what to think, for the silent dame, although she declined to reply, continued to keep pace with him and to walk at his side. Was it someone who had no business to be out at that hour, and who did not wish to be recognised, he wondered. But if so, thought he, why did she continue to march in a line with him? The voice certainly was that of one of a different rank to his own, But, on the other hand, he reflected, if she were one of the gentlefolks, why the cottager's cloak and bonnet, and the huge market basket? These conjectures crossed his brain in rapid succession, and influenced by the last one, that as to his companion's clothing, he determined again to address her. "You met her left your tongue out warm, missus," said he, "sin' you canna answer a civil mon." This taunt, however, like the direct query, failed to provoke an answer, although the startled Gabriel could have sworn that a smothered laugh came from beneath the white cloth, which covered the contents of the basket. "Let me carry your basket," said he. "It's heavy for you." Without a word, the woman held it out to him, but as Gabriel grasped the handle, a voice, which sounded as though the mouth of the speaker were close to his hand, slowly said, "You're very kind, I'm sure." And then there came from the same quarter a silvery peal of laughter. "What in the world can it be?" said Gabriel, as without more ado he let the basket fall to the ground. He did not remain in ignorance very long, however, for as the white cloth slipped off, a human head with fixed eyes rolled out. "The Headless Boggart!" cried he, as the figure turned to pick up the head, and revealed to him an empty bonnet, and away he fled down the hill, fear lending him speed. He had not run far, however, before he heard a clatter of feet on the hard road behind him. But Gabriel was one of the fleetest lads about the fells, and the sight he had just seen was calculated to bring out all his powers, so the sound did not grow louder. But just as he turned into the old Chagley road, the head, thrown by the boggart, came whizzing past in an unpleasant proximity to his own, and went rolling along in front of him. For a second or two Gabriel hesitated what to do, the headless woman behind and the equally terrible head in front, but it did not take long to decide, and he went forward with renewed vigour, thinking to pass the dreadful thing rapidly rolling along in advance of him. No sooner was he near to it, however, than, with an impish laugh which rang in his ears for days afterwards, the ghastly object diverged from its course and rolled in his way. With a sudden and instinctive bound he leapt over it, and as he did so the head jumped from the ground and snapped at his feet, the teeth striking together with a dreadfully suggestive clash. Gabriel was too quick for it, however, but for some distance he heard with horrible distinctness the clattering of the woman's feet and the banging of the head upon the road behind him. Gradually the sounds grew fainter as he speeded along, and at length, after he had crossed a little stream of water which trickled across the lane from a fern-covered spring in the fell side, the sounds ceased altogether. The runner, however, did not pause to take breath until he had reached his home and had crept beneath the blankets. The trembling Trotty, whom he found crouched in terror at the door of the cottage, skulking upstairs at his heels and taking refuge under the bed. "I always said as they'd be seeing a fearing with his stopping out o' neets," remarked his spouse, after he had narrated his adventure. "But if it nobbut makes the fane o' the young Hearthstone, I'se be some glad on it, for it's more nor a woman with head on her shoulders has been able to do.